Well, good morning or good evening or good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Looking forward to your questions, looking forward to your conversations, and really helping, I guess, discuss the fact that employee engagement is really about unlocking the potential, especially in the fields of business. But most importantly, today, we're going to take a look at how that works in education. So if you can just go into the chat window, and give me an idea of where you are watching the webinar from, that would be fantastic so that we can get an idea of where we're going to be impacting education today. The level of impact we can have is quite substantial in this one. So I'm here in Las Vegas, Nevada. So good to be with you. Istanbul, Turkey on the call as we get around the rest of the world. Germany in the building. So fantastic to have everybody joining us from all over. But today is really about education. And what does that actually mean? How do we take a look at this thing called employee engagement? Well, if we start to really think about what Engage and Grow does, it's about help empower people and help unlock the potential of the people in different fields. In education is no different to every other field in the fact that what we're really trying to do is get a much better result out of the humans that are in the organization. And I think that's an aspect of what we're doing that needs to be addressed. And so how do we do that, I guess, is probably the biggest question that we should be looking for. How do we actually make that happen? Well, as I'm a professional teacher, I guess. I'm not teaching the kids or not in that field of education. As a professional teacher, educator, author, all of those things, I think what Dan Rather says is really important for us to understand. The teacher that leads, I guess teachers really are to be seen as leaders. The leadership they have of the young people in the world is quite phenomenal. And so that's kind of an exciting aspect to focus on the fact that teachers are leaders. They're leaders of future leaders, I guess, is probably the simplest way to look at it. And if we see them as not just educators, but we see them as future leaders or leaders of future leaders, we start to get an idea of just how important it is to develop amazing teachers out there in the world. So when it comes to quality level of education, one of the things that we have to understand is that we're talking globally here. Obviously, the progression over the last 20 to 30 years has been quite phenomenal, especially in education levels of in third world countries, almost equality across the sexes in third world countries now. But when we start to think about the right of children to learn, not just the right of them to learn, but the right to a highly engaged quality level of education, it's really an interesting debate around certain things. Because with great education comes great future. With great education, better health. All of these things manifest through education. We create generational shifts through education. And that's why it's so important to me what we're discussing here today. The fact that we have to get better at education around the world is, I guess, not something that people want to debate. How we get there is going to be an interesting thing. If we want young people to shape the future, then we need to give them the tools, resources, skills, and knowledge and education in order to do that. And knowledge and education isn't just from the books, it's from those wonderful teachers who work with them. So if we take a look at education, and I know there's been some amazing work around the world being done in education, starting to flip education on its head, saying, okay, instead of the kids learning at class and going home and doing the work, maybe it should be the other way around, where they watch videos at home and then come to class and discuss what they learned, sort of thing. But there's obviously technological shifts that need to happen for that, and many things that need to be moving the world in that market. So in terms of, well, if you jump to the second point here in terms of revenue, it's a massive education market, but are we getting the best results for our money? Are we getting the best results for what we're doing? Good to see Madrid join. So we're now all across Europe. We're across the US. So let's see what other continents will be joining us at this through this meeting. Well, the human resources needs of the education sector are something that, well, unless we really take a look at the level of ability for employee engagement at that level of teachers, staff, it's never going to be a thing that we can do with the students, absenteeism, all of these levels of academic achievement. These are things that in many ways, and I want to boil it down with you here today, in many ways we can look at from an engagement perspective. If we can increase engagement, and we see this in business all the time, if we increase engagement, we decrease absenteeism, we decrease all of the negatives, and we increase the positives, even right through not just profitability, but safety and number of days at work and people's connectivity levels. Well, doing that in an education field ought to be something of a priority. And I think that's why you're here with me today to discuss that. And if you have any questions at any point in time, please feel very free to type those into the chat window. But ultimately, a thriving school where staff succeed and therefore students succeed takes highly engaged educators, highly engaged leadership, highly engaged right through the organization, which even at times goes back to the full community factor. I even know just recently at my own kids' school, bringing in one of the great teachers, Charles Vogel, on community and how the community can work together and engaging the community and all of those sorts of things. And Charles's number one favorite saying on that day was invitations matter. That you actually invite people on things really matters. So kind of a great way to look at engagement is who are you inviting to what things, not just sending out emails. Of course, an email isn't an invitation, sending out, actually inviting people. So I talk about business on a lot of the stuff we do here at Engage and Grow, but we've got to face the fact of should schools be run like a business? Or are they not businesses? I guess that's the interesting debate. And I'd love for you in the chat window to put yours debate in there. The thought of being a teacher and losing sleep over your students, the kids, they're not your kids, but you're at that level. And I know I've watched many of my kids' teachers over the years take a level, having 5 kids. This is why this subject is so important in my mind, or for me, having watched teachers who are massively engaged in the future of my kids versus teachers who are not, and just seeing the difference in my kids from that. And that to me is a big part of it. And that's a big part of why, we can say it's not a business, because your customers, you don't really get a say in your customers or in your participants. The students that come to you could be having an awful day at home. They could come in rude and abusive, or they could come in loving and learning type thing. So maybe it's not what we'd call a business, but maybe if we want the level of engagement, is we say, well, do we run it like a business? How do we run this thing so that we are getting the level of engagement that we need to get? And so if we look at productivity within a school, if we look at the education system and how productive it is at building great young humans, and how productive it is at giving teachers and the leadership of the organization, the leadership of the school, the skills and ability and the knowledge to get to where they need to go, maybe we do need to think about whether we should run it like a school. So staff, if we're a business and we think about our staff, the teachers are our staff, and the work they do every day doesn't change the fact that they are a team member in an organization. It doesn't change the fact that they are part of an organization where the 6 steps that we use at Engage and Grow, from evaluation, buy-in, unite, right through to the grow factor and the green factor, is definitely something we need to think through. If we're running it like a business and we take those people to a higher level of performance, then of course the entire organization is going to better, including the kids type thing. So are there challenges in the HR sector or in the education sector? Yes, there's definitely things that we look at. So if we think about what impacts, because what impacts a teacher is different in many ways to what impacts an employee in a different or in a normal organization. It's not like the teacher is someone sitting in a cubicle churning out their work, or working in a restaurant doing the things. No, these are people who have taken on the responsibility and in some ways the accountability for the performance of a young human, to turn that young human into an amazing person type thing. So when we look at the teachers, and we see this in a lot of professions where if they get through the first 3 years, we generally will get to be able to keep them for life. But in teachers, it's not even that simple, okay? So if we think about turnover and attrition from this profession, teachers' feelings of, well, as the speed of change and the speed of technological shifts is making it not, well, in many cases, it's not making it easier for teachers, it's making it harder. If we take a look at some of the scholastic systems out there, yes, the well-funded schools where the kids have iPads or computers is very different to the average school out there where they have a computer room full of probably outdated computers that the kids get to use every now and again. And it brings about the level of burnout. And this is why, that level of intensity, I watch people with their kids, and even me, I know I've got 5 kids. If I've got all of my kids one day, just my 5 kids, and they're my kids, they're not someone else's kids. If I've got them for a day, I feel burned out, sort of thing. So the level of emotional energy needed by teachers, by educators, by educational professionals, because they're dealing with 2 sides. And I even still see this that when I was a boy, I remember being called into the principal's office, and I remember my mum coming to get me, and at no point did my mother argue with the principal that, no, Brad's a good boy, he should be well taken care of. My mother was like, yes, Brad, you should listen to the principal and do as you're told. And they took the side. Now we see teachers and educators having to be defend themselves to the parents of these kids rather than be supported by the parents. And so all of these things lead to a teacher's engagement in what they do, and therefore a student's engagement in their process of learning, and therefore the academic performance and possibly even the future life performance as we go into this. So if I haven't stressed enough to you so far how important this is, hopefully, let's jump into it. If we look at sustainable well-being for teachers, okay, and then we'll take a look at what engaged schools do differently, okay? How does an engaged school do it? If we don't have teachers who are empowered, appreciated, well-prepared, they can't help the child, not just the child who's at the current level going forward, but they can't bring a child from underperforming forward type thing to catch up. Not only on, it's not just work conditions, it's on belief, it's on how they feel about themselves, how they feel about the support from their organization, support from other people in the organization, support from from other teachers, from the leadership, from the parents. All of those things lead to engagement and belief, I guess, from the teachers. And I guess when we take a look at sustainable well-being for teachers, there has to be a way of making sure there is noticing and noticing when that burnout is happening, noticing when the teachers are not at that peak of well-being sort of thing. And it's not getting easier, it's getting harder. But ultimately we can do things differently. The voice of a teachers need to be front and center in designing where they're going, designing effective education systems. But if we flip it over just for a second and say, okay, well, what is it that the most engaged schools do differently? Obviously, they have rocket ships with Crayolas on them. No, that's not what they do differently. If we take a look at it, and Gallup is wonderful with this in that they do so much research on this thing. And of course, fortunately or unfortunately, this is mostly a US thing because that's where they could get the research. So engaged school identify the right leaders. It's not about those who've been there the longest. It's not about those who have seniority. It's not about those who were the best teachers. It's about the right leadership for the school. Okay, so that leadership of the school needs to be inclusive, engaged, and even taking a look at, the other webinars that we do here at Engage and Grow. If you're looking at our diversity, equity, inclusion process, engagement process, if you're looking at the compassionate leader process, that all of these things are a part of what choosing that right leader for the organization is. And it's really about leadership because, as we know, teachers are leaders. So the leadership of the school are leaders of future leaders, if that makes sense. Number two, we focus on the teacher's strengths. Too often I see, and we see this across all businesses, not just the scholastic business, where, we'll fix their weaknesses. No, look, I think it was Marcus Buckingham who wrote the book called Go for Your Strengths. And it really comes down to where do we find someone's absolute strengths? And I look at it over the years with my kids in school, and I remember having to assist the soccer coaching for one of my kids because I'm pretty sure the teacher who got put in to run the soccer team had absolutely no idea what they were doing running the soccer team. And he was a young man, and I offered my assistance, and he was very, very grateful for it. If we can focus on their strengths rather than just having them fill whatever gap is necessary, it definitely changes the way that school reacts and changes the way that school gets results. Number three, the culture of recognition. This is across all areas. The culture of recognition is not just of the kids. I see too much where there's recognition at the student level, but nowhere near enough recognition at the teacher and leadership level. There's nowhere near enough Teacher of the Week programs. There's nowhere near enough of this stuff where teachers get that recognition they deserve for the great work that they're doing on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. And it could just be as simple as the culture of recognition being text messages or a group shout out for someone. It could be just noticing something small and putting a post-it note on the teacher's desk. It could be just tiny little things. It could be several awards where one teacher has the Teacher of the Week award and they give it to another teacher. They notice another teacher who's doing a great job. It doesn't have to be from the leadership of the organization, and it doesn't have to be massively formal. It just needs to be that culture of recognizing what's done and recognizing the things that are moving. The measurement, you cannot manage what you do not measure. And I don't care what type of business or organization it is, if you're not measuring engagement. Now, I want to point out one really important thing. And if you go to my video book, I did a video book with Marshall Goldsmith, Richard Maloney, and Mark Thompson around engagement. It's a 10-chapter video book. You can find it on the Engage and Grow YouTube channel, or you can go to engageandgrow.com, find it there. But what Marshall talked about in that video was too much engagement measuring is how well did the company do to engage you today? What did the company do? And Marshall says in the greatest of organizations, they flip it around and ask, what did you do today to engage other teachers? What did you do today to engage more people in the thing? So it's putting the onus on every team member to be a part of that, but measurement of engagement is really important. Point 5 could be worded the other way around. People do things in teams. They rely on each other. They work together to do things rather than, you know, if every teacher in fourth grade is trying to create their own learning plan, lesson plan, activities, etc., it makes it hard on every teacher in fourth grade. If the teachers in fourth grade all work together, then hey, presto, we get a lot more engagement. And it's no more complex than saying, if people work together on projects, there is more engagement. Why do we move kids around and have kids in different groups? Why do we actually get the kids involved in group scenarios? Because we want their engagement with other kids and other to learn from different children in the class and learn from different people. Number 6, this one, building an engaged school is not an event. I want to be very clear on the fact that employee engagement is not something you do once. It's not like, you know, it's almost like marketing. You don't do marketing once and expect customers to come forever. You don't do engagement or team building or that once and expect it to have an ongoing effect. We have to continue and focus on it. So let's break it down then, and hopefully those 6 things make sense. If they don't, please chat, throw a thing. The recognition bulletin board, great schools have bulletin boards for recognition, newsletters for recognition. Thanks for pointing that out, team. So many things you can do in great schools around that. Okay, so if we take a look at the engagement in an educational facility, students need engagement. There is no 2 ways about it. And we can break it down in a very simple thing, okay? Where do they need engagement? Well, they need engagement with the staff, the teachers, okay, and even leadership in the organization. And they definitely need engagement with the content, what they're learning and what they're growing through and how they're learning and growing. And so when we take a look at the relationships, challenge, and clarity, it starts to give us a different perspective on, okay, where do we measure the engagement in the relationship? How do we measure the level of challenge for the student? And I had this conversation with a friend of mine just recently, because for me as a young man, I found school very easy. I was lucky in that I found the schooling system very easily. And I know that I would have become a very disengaged student if my teacher had not set me extra stuff to do, extra classwork, extra things, and sent me with 2 other students to go and do that work on our own. We would have become disengaged, not because we were bad kids, but because we were bored. You know, the whole thing of it is really important to keep that level of challenge of the student. And even today, I know I teach a lot of adults, especially people in business or leadership of schooling things. And I know my coaches, the employee engagement coaches of Engage and Grow around the world, work with adults. We must keep them challenged. It doesn't matter whether the student is young or older. If they're not challenged, they get bored, and boredom leads to disengagement. The content and the clarity. If there is confusion, it leads to disengagement. Okay, so we need clarity of learning, and that's where a lot of the time, you know, kids get sent home. And even for me, I know I've tried to do new age math with my kids, and a couple of their teachers over the years have said to me, Brad, can you stop teaching them the old way? This is the new way. I'm like, I don't know the new way. But anyway, that's part of being a parent, I guess, is I've got to keep up with it. We'll get to engaged parents next. But if you think about that, how the clarity of what we're learning, you know, removal of confusion is a very important part of it. And that's where technology is assisting us dramatically of helping kids learn things in different ways by playing games, by doing things online, so much ability to do that. But then the challenge side of it, we got to keep them challenged, and the relationships. And the relationships isn't just with the teachers and the leadership, the relationships is with each other as well. And of course, that brings about managing everything from technological relationships and all of those different aspects of it. But as I mentioned, from a parent's point of view, and I think that the school's leadership and how they bring parents into the organization, how they invite, and I'll say Charles Vogel's thing again, an email to all of the parents inviting them to a thing is not an invitation. a kid's teacher actually calling me and saying, hey, Mr. Sugars, Colton would really like you to turn up to this event so that he can learn more with you. That's an invitation. You know, it's not a mass email, or it was in the newsletter. That's not an invitation, my friends. So we want to get better at inviting people to things, and we want to get better at having people who are active inviting more people to things. Don't just have the same group of 10 parents turn up. Ask that group of 10 parents to invite another 2 parents each next time round. Academic standards, how does that play into engaged parents? Well, knowing what level we want the kids to perform at, parents being a part of that and helping make that decision, and actually being encouraging of their kids' performance, the school environment itself, the actual physical environment, and whether parents and when parents are encouraged or allowed to participate. Very important aspect to where that engagement happens. The personalized learning of it, you know, when a child needs to have extra work, or when a child is getting ahead and needs to change, that personalized learning involving the parent in that is important. But ultimately, it comes down to the leadership and the communication. How does leadership communicate with parents? How does leadership involve parents? And it's, again, it's not just the monthly parent and teacher meeting. It's really more than that. It's engaging them. And so when we take a look at the engage and grow formula for this and saying, okay, if we look at going green, and we call it going green because it means getting to engaged and growing. Okay, that's what we mean by going green. When we're at red, what we see in an organization is people, a percentage of the organization is not engaged. There is a percentage that is engaged, but there is, at red, there is a percentage of the group that is actively disengaged, like actively not participating, and even at times sabotaging what's going on in an organization. When we move through to yellow, the unite and align is where we start to remove a lot of that active disengagement and start to move people to more of them are engaged, but some are still not fully engaged, or they're still disengaged to a degree, but they're not acting in a negative format, if that makes sense. So a more engaged school does take 6 steps, and the 6 steps are the same as all of the organizations we work through, but they're slightly different. Our program of working in schools is different, obviously, to our program of working in a Forbes 500 company or in a small to mid-sized company. Schools are treated differently, and thus our program for working with you is different to a degree. Even though the formula is the same, the way we get there is different, and the conversations we have will be different. So when we ask what color is your school, the majority of times when a principal or a CEO or the leadership of a school is asked, what color is your school? Of course, they would all love to think our school is green. You know, we are at engaged, we are at growing. The challenge for all of us as leaders, and I know for me as a leader of organizations, rarely are we as the leader at the level of in touch with the engagement scores of our organization that we need to be. It's rarely are we there. You know, I would love to think that all schools would be at green. My reality is, though, that I find that when we do go in and we do the surveys, that we find there is a lot more red than someone would like to see. And facing up to that is really the only way we can change it. And it takes a courageous leader to really confront engagement. It's not a leader who's sitting there going, you know, I'd like to have an easy life. I'd like to, you know, just run this and not deal with any of the challenges and not worry about it. That sort of leader, A, shouldn't be running a school. They're not a leader of leaders. But if that sort of leader is not one that's going to, you know, focus on the engagement. And so, yeah, it does take a courageous leader to say, we want to be an engaged organization. We want to be an engaged school, have engaged team. but also have engaged students and parents in our organization. So if we start to think about just, and I won't read these to you, you can read these on your own, obviously. I personally believe that employee engagement in the education sector is of massive importance because not only because of the hard work that leaders, principals, teachers, support staff all have to do, but because the impact it has on future generations is just so massive. And I love when we work in schools or scholastic organizations, be they even childcare organizations that we work with right through to universities, and we start to see the shifts in the organization. It dramatically changes what happens in that community over a period of time. It doesn't just change the life of the teachers, it changed the lives of everyone that they touch, the kids, and then the kids' families are also changed. The more we can engage schools, the better we can engage communities is probably the simple thing. You know, when we think about engagement, it's not just engagement. It affects diversity, equity, and inclusion. It affects compassion. It affects all of the leadership of the organization. And ultimately, the more we can engage everybody, the less pressure there is on everybody, if that makes sense. It's like the more everyone can come together, the better it is. So that's why I love watching the 12-week programs enacted in schools. So it usually can run in one semester, but those 12-week programs of bringing everybody on board. And of course, if I go back to some points that I've already mentioned, that absenteeism, turnover, all of those things, we want to decrease those, obviously, but we want to increase the positives more so than just decrease the negatives. And that's why it's really important to do this across the whole school or with all of the teachers in the organization or all of the leadership as a starting point of the organization. And I know that it's interesting when I look at some of the schools where we go in and work with just the leadership team, you know, the top 10, 12, 15 people in the leadership team. It's rare that they don't then go on to want it right through the organization, even if it's just an education program through the organization. But usually they want to do some of our very highly interactive programs. So engaged teachers, engaged students, engaged parents, engaged leadership. What does the world look like when we do that? How does the world change when we do that? You know, our manifesto here at Engage and Grow is that we believe employee engagement will change the world. And if it's happening in schools, well, we're getting a triple whammy. We're getting that triple result. Not only is the employee engagement impacting the team of the school, it's impacting the students of the school, and through them impacting the parents or the families and the community as a whole in that. If you haven't downloaded our ebook, please jump on engageandgrow.com, download the ebook on this. And there's plenty of other ebooks there for you to read as well, and recordings of these webinars if you want to take those on as well. Educators, I give you all the kudos. You have a huge responsibility, a huge accountability for what you do. But yeah, I know I got sent in a couple of questions before the event, so let me deal with those. And then to any other questions that you might type in to the chat window. So one of the first questions I got, I sort of touched on it here during this session, but it was, how does a education engagement differ from employee engagement in large organizations? You know, look, to just extend a few points on what I mentioned there earlier. When we take a look at the school system, and it is a system, we all understand, educare, from the Latin root, the word educare, to draw out. A lot of the times we're not drawing out, we're not engaging, we are having to follow a curriculum and get through the curriculum rather than draw out the brilliance of the kids, rather than drawing out the brilliance of the students. But that also comes down to, are we drawing out the brilliance of the educators? Are we drawing out the brilliance of what they do? And as I study it's really interesting for me as an educator of adults and adult business people, adult teachers, adults around the world. A lot of what we've moved to is the ability to deliver the knowledge through video, and then the discussion and the implementation through facilitation. And that's where I know our programs at Engage and Grow get the results, because we come into organizations and facilitate the change and facilitate that human interaction and the change in people. You know, engagement really, when it boils down to it, comes back to human engagement. That's where it all starts. And that's ultimately where we get the best results. If we want to get the change to happen, it's got to be done together, I think the thing is. How do we deal with someone who treats their job as just a job? Look, if they're treating their job as just a job, they're not at red. Let's put it that way. They're not in the negative to the organization. They're not actually in sabotage mode. They're not that person that goes to a meeting, just sits there and listens quietly, doesn't say anything. Then when they walk outside, they start backstabbing everything that went on in the meeting. So someone who is just treating their job as just a job is actually in a really great place. We can actually move them to highly engaged relatively quickly, because they're not in a negative space. Sometimes some of the people in a negative space do need to move on for an organization to move on. But most of the people who are just at that job, treating their job as just a job, most of them are actually in a pretty good place for us, and we're pretty happy to work with them. We can generally find a way to move them to engage fairly quickly. So, like the idea of personalizing invites, see getting higher result turn by doing that rather than the overall email. And it does take more work. I mean, look, if let's use I don't know, if I was doing a dinner party at my house and I called 3 couples and invited them, I would notice if one of them didn't show up, sort of thing, you know? And that's the difference, I guess, between an invitation and an announcement. An announcement, you don't really care who shows up. An invitation, you actually care if they show up. And it's that caring if they show up that I think is a big part of what we're looking at today. So listen, I'll leave it with you. Educators, please get back in touch with the Engage and Grow coach who chatted with you about this program and how we can run it in your school, how we can get more engagement through the leadership and through the teaching organization, and therefore through the kids and through the parents in the organization. You do great work. I applaud all of the great work you do, and I thank you for all the great work you do. And I look forward to being able to help you from the team here at Engage and Grow. Take care. Bye for now. Jump on the website, download that ebook, and we'll chat with you soon. Bye for now.